We are going to dive into our second section of this three-part partnered webinar with the State Chamber of Oklahoma. And we are going to dive in a little about policy and legislative changes that really could influence how a business could plan for 2021 planning. And if it's anything like 2020, we know 2021 could be a little bit unpredictable, but definitely some resources available for those who are interested in what's going on with policy. So Emily, let's go ahead and dive into that. You touched on this in the first section. Tell us, unemployment is a really big issue for both businesses, employers, employees. Tell us what the State Chamber is doing to advocate for that change. You talked a little bit about the system being a little outdated, that it could use some refreshing. Take us down that road.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the first section, before COVID hit, we were up at the Capitol recommending various reforms to our state legislature to help improve the system, to help it easier, make it an easier system for employers, for beneficiaries. And then COVID hit and we looked silly because there were so many people that were just in need of unemployment benefits. So our reforms and our perspective kind of got set aside, rightfully so, because of the pandemic. But we're still going to charge ahead to push for those. One of them, we think it's really important that our benefits that we're offering to unemployed individuals are tied to Oklahoma's economic conditions. That's a lot of fluffy language to say. When the economy is really strong, benefits should be provided for a lesser amount of time. When we're in situations like we are now, hopefully never again another global pandemic, but when our economy is not as strong and we do have higher unemployment, we think benefits should be offered for a longer period of time. Just tying it to the economic conditions of the state so that we're incentivizing people when jobs are available to get back to work. We also think it's extremely important that we offer credible, reliable, usable job training for people who do become unemployed. Just plugging them into a program and expecting that that's going to be their next career might not work. And so maybe some career counseling and additional job training being available when someone does enter into that unemployment system. And I mentioned this in the last segment, but I think it's really important to hit on again. Before we can do that, we have to modernize the system. We're talking about technology and software that dates back probably before you and I were born, Casey, to the point that benefits aren't being paid out in a timely manner. We all saw that in the news. Those were not anecdotal stories of just an angry person that got in front of a news camera. That was unfortunately kind of the norm. People were having to wait weeks on end. And while I hope everyone has a great savings account, that's not the case necessarily for every family and every working Oklahoman. And so making sure we're paying out those benefits in a timely manner to help those people get back up on their feet and support their families during that time. But then also modernizing the system to help employers. So when a claim is filed against an employer, they are required to go into a system and acknowledge the claim. And if they want to make an appeal, they can. But it's all very, very antiquated. It's through the mail. It's not a system that is friendly with this device. We need to make it a more user-friendly system for employers because those are the ones that pay into the system. I think what we've learned too over the last year in talking to businesses is they're not contesting the unemployment system. We know it has to exist. We know we all have to pay unemployment taxes. There are going to be times like what we're living through right now that require those benefits to be paid out. But let's make sure that we're paying out what people need and it's done in a timely manner and that the system is fair and objective for all parties that have to engage with it. And so one big thing that I do want to mention that I didn't touch on in the previous segment was unemployment wage benefit increases. So a wage benefit increase is essentially what happens when an employer has to let go employees. They actually see a wage benefit increase pretty immediately thereafter of letting go an employee because the system now has a new beneficiary in it. more money has to be paid out. Our state made a very wise decision with some input from the state chamber and from our members about putting a halt on those wage benefit increases in 2020. So if you had a COVID-related reduction in your staff, you will not see wage benefit increases in 2020. But that doesn't mean we won't see increases in 2021, and we can talk about that as well. But I think that that's something to note for a lot of these businesses who may have had to let people go, that you will not see a charge this year. If you do, you need to call the unemployment office, because they, by an executive order, are halted from charging those wage benefit increases.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. Businesses are really about to begin their annual strategic planning. BBB offers a resource we do every October. We do a strategic planning panel, and we're excited to bring that back. That being said, what big changes are you seeing in those industries, whether it's banking, insurance, and tax, that businesses should be aware of?
So I'll start with tax. I think we saw a lot of, not a lot, but some deferments offered for people paying taxes this spring. So you weren't required to pay your state and federal income taxes on April 15th. We got a couple months relief. There were other deferments offered on a county level basis for different sales and property taxes. And that's obviously 77 counties, 77 different options. So be in tune with what your county is offering, your county tax assessor. But make sure you're keeping track that those deferments are probably only for that spring, summer period, and they're probably going to get back to normal collections around now. So while that's probably not great news, it's news you need to be aware of. If you're paying property and sales tax, don't be late on them. So be aware of those. Another thing that might not be on folks' radar that is important, if you are taking advantage of a state tax credit this year or a state tax incentive, make sure you're still meeting the eligibility requirements for that program, for that incentive. If you were, for example, if you were required to maintain a certain payroll threshold or certain job requirements, or maintain a number of jobs in your community, COVID very likely impacted your ability to maintain that payroll threshold in those jobs. So you may not be still eligible in this current tax year, but you're not aware of it. And then the tax collector is going to come knock on your door and say you owe this, but you didn't plan for it. So that might be something to just go back through your files and check when you applied for a tax incentive or a tax credit. Make sure you're still meeting those eligibility requirements. The other one, unemployment taxes in 2021, I mentioned it in the previous question that you asked. How much are they going to increase next year? We know they will, unfortunately. And it really depends on the solvency of our unemployment insurance trust fund. I mentioned earlier, employers pay that unemployment insurance. It goes into our trust fund. At a certain point by law, if our trust fund balance gets below a certain level, it triggers an automatic increase. And so we're extremely hopeful, fingers, toes, hairs, whatever crossed, that we don't go below that level, because that could mean double-digit unemployment tax increases on businesses. We are encouraging Congress and mentioning it to our Oklahoma delegation that any support the federal government can give to states across the country to replenish those unemployment trust funds is welcome. We'll take it. I know of another state chamber colleague who was telling me that their trust fund went down to essentially zero, which is just astonishing, because these trust funds, let me be clear, they have like $1 billion in them, most of them. I mean, we're talking a lot of money. The state had to take a $900 million loan out from the federal government. So, I mean, these are just crazy numbers that will be very significant for Oklahoma businesses. So that's something to think about in your annual strategic planning, is how much will your unemployment taxes increase next year? I can't tell you an exact number, but it's something to definitely be mindful of. The last one I'm going to mention, health insurance benefits, and the impact of COVID. There were some changes made, some flexibilities offered under many health plans, as required by federal and state regulations, during COVID times to help everybody get a COVID test if they needed it, to help them to get the care that they needed in a more timely manner. But how is that going to change in 2021? We're not sure yet. And so many people are usually on a calendar year for re-upping their healthcare plan. So just be mindful that there could be some changes coming in 2021. One of them that comes to mind is telehealth going to be as robust of a benefit in your plan. Many of us probably use that phone that's sitting right next to me to talk to a doctor to say, hey, I have a cold. Is this a cold or is this COVID? And so I think that some of those telehealth benefits will be here to stay, but just be mindful of that and make sure you're talking with your employees about some changes that could be coming. You just don't want to get slapped with a bill that you weren't expecting, weren't prepared for.
Thank you, Emily. And in the last question, we really touched, or you really gave a lot of information on tax, but I'd like to know, what is the State Chamber doing to protect those tax incentives for business?
Yeah, so we actually lived this session. I'll give you an example. There is an ad valorem tax exemption that is offered on a county basis to manufacturers, to certain manufacturers in the state. So they get a 5-year exemption from property taxes, which is a great benefit to help someone relocate here, to someone growing an existing manufacturing business. The legislature kind of very last minute, I'm not going to say in the dead of night because that sounds like a scene out of a movie, but it was like 7 o'clock, so it was late in my opinion. They were seeking to change some parameters of the program and end it for 2021 and going forward. Well, we weren't, the business community was not considered on that. We weren't asked how this is going to impact us, how, what are people going to be able to pay these bills come 2021? And so myself and my team, we monitor tax incentives, credits, and exemptions very, very closely. We work with a state body here, the Incentive Evaluation Commission, to help them review and monitor those and determine the viability. And we will be the first to say, this tax credit's underutilized, maybe we don't need it. But the ones that are utilized, we advocate and fight for tooth and nail, and we do it after 7 o'clock, after the bill has been filed, when no one else is paying attention. And so I think we know the worst thing that our state could do for tax benefits for a growing business, or maybe to a relocating business, someone saying they want to come to Oklahoma, is to pull the rug out from under them very last minute, after maybe investments have been made. And so our job, and this is really, really kind of the bread and butter of what we do, is to have our ear to the ground, be talking to elected officials, be talking to individuals at the tax commission to better understand how they're utilized and be ready to defend them if and when they come up on the chopping block. So.
Awesome, Emily. Thank you. And to wrap up again, this section, tell us where businesses can find this latest information on all of these changes.
I'm just going to keep sending you back to my website or to my email, okstatechamber.com. Our members get bi-monthly updates from myself, my team, and other colleagues of mine here at the State Chamber about what's going on at the Capitol, about what's going on at various regulatory agencies that maybe some of our viewers may be licensed by or just have interaction with, whether you like to or not. And so we try to provide really relevant and timely updates where we know your inbox gets full because of the environment we're in. This is the way to connect. And so we try to provide the most relevant, timely, and concise updates and get you the information you need. So that website or my email, which you have.